Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. For the America First, Second, and Third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2015, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to pow on a Friday, and another weekend of whatever chaos, confusion, and corruption the money junkies can think of next. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. I see somebody's already dialing in. Going to get to that phone call. Tom is sitting in our control room, as usual, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And before we go any further, we have a little sad news for the independent media community. Michael Collins Piper passed away this last weekend. He had been dealing with some serious medical issues. It's reported that he died of a heart attack. He was only 55 years old. And he had suffered quite a bit of harassment for his truth-telling over the years. He authored many books and was on many radio shows. We've got some articles and videos about him, links to audio archives of some of his commentary, and so have to say goodbye to him. He will be missed. He was one of the good guys. All right, then. Turning over to Russia and Ukraine. I got a couple of articles out of the Russian media through Google Translate. And apparently there are some complaints about Saakashvili, who has been granted the mayorship of Odessa in Ukraine. And he's promptly fired all the officials within the Odessa government and replaced them with his cronies coming up from Georgia. This has, in fact, already triggered a backlash among the people of Odessa, who are simply refusing to deal with all of these non-Ukrainians that they're being told they have to obey and give money to and obedience to. It's a continuation of Poroshenko's process following the coup d'etat in Kiev. He brought in a lot of people from outside. It's caused a huge amount of resentment. Ukraine is very visibly under foreign rule at this point, and it's creating quite a bit of friction. Now, there is one historical note. Last May 29th, Ukraine's official delegation to the United Nations informed the UN that Ukraine now recognizes the sea and land borders with the Republic of Crimea. Now, that's good in that it recognizes Crimea's independence. It's bad because it's referring to it as a Republic of Crimea and not part of the Russian republics. But it is historic. Poroshenko apparently, at least officially, has given up the ambition of somehow grabbing Crimea and bringing it back under his personal control here. Over in Russia, their prime minister is out there saying that if any more sanctions are introduced against Russia, there will be symmetrical responses, meaning they will take economic steps equal in force and magnitude back the other way. That's a serious threat, because of the damage the existing sanctions have done to companies in Europe, especially in Germany, companies here in the United States of America, Canada, all over the world. These sanctions backflashed. They didn't work, so of course the U.S. government says, let's do more of them. Makes a lot of sense if you're in the government. We're going to take a phone call here. Andrew in New York. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Doing fine.
I want to talk about the sinking of your ship, the USS Liberty, how Israel just got away with it.
Yes.
Like, why was Israel, did they purposely do that, or was it just an accident?
Well, the official story, it was an accident that Israel is saying it was a case of mistaken identity, that they thought the ship was an Egyptian horse carrier, because as we all know, horse carriers have large, giant dish antennas all over the top of them. But what appears to have happened is there were actually two aspects at work. One was the Liberty was picking up radio traffic from Israel, which revealed that Israel was committing serious war crimes in the ongoing conflict at the time, and Israel apparently decided to sink the ship and frame Egypt for it. And even while the ship was under attack by Israel, Israel was telling the U.S. government, it's the Egyptians, it's the Egyptians. There was actually an airstrike in the air on the way to Cairo when the crew of the Liberty finally rigged a makeshift antenna and got a message out saying it's the Israelis trying to sink us. And then President Johnson and Admiral McCain basically got together and said, well, we can't embarrass our Middle Eastern ally. It's an accident. And they basically hushed everybody up, threatened them all with court-martials. Captain McGonigal received the Congressional Medal of Honor for valor in keeping his ship afloat and most of his crew alive under this unprovoked attack against a ship that really didn't have much in the way of weapons. It was a radio intercept ship. They had a rifle for dealing with sharks, and that's about it. They didn't have any heavy weapons whatsoever. But interestingly enough, it was the only Congressional Medal of Honor ever issued in the nation's history that was not bestowed by the president personally at the White House. He was given his medal over at the Navy Yard, so the public and the press couldn't get in there. It was all big, hushed-up secret. And it was a lot of years before the crew of the Liberty said, well, we don't care if they're going to throw us in jail. This was a tremendous crime against us. We're very angry. We want it acknowledged that it was Israel intentionally attacking us. They knew who we were. I mean, Israel was saying they couldn't see the flag. The weather was cloudy. It was foggy. The Israeli pilots have really terrible eyesight, but they're the best that we can get. But if you go to the U.S. Cryptographic Museum, they have the flag from the USS Liberty on display there, and it has cannon holes in it from the attacking Israeli aircraft. So they not only knew it was a U.S. ship, they were shooting the flag up in the process.
Yeah, Israel always gets away with everything.
Yeah, they do officially. You know, the officialdom goes on with this make-believe and pretend, and everything is all fine. But out here in the real world, you know, people are picking up on what's been going on. They understand that the official story is not to be trusted about anything. Corporate media is not to be trusted about anything, and they're becoming very active researchers in their own right, and they're going out and they're finding the information. And yeah, Israel has committed a lot of crimes, dirty tricks. They tricked Reagan into bombing Libya. There was the one case that was exposed to public scorn was the Lavon affair down in Egypt back in the 50s, where Israel was bombing U.S. and British assets in Egypt and planting evidence to frame the Egyptian Muslims for it. And one of the bombs detonated prematurely. The Egyptian authorities caught the bomber, identified him as an Israeli agent, and of course Israel's immediate and always reaction, oh, it's an anti-Semitic plot. The Jew haters made this up to make us look bad. Finally, they were forced to say, yeah, you caught us. It was us. We thought it was a cute little trick, and promised they would never do it again, which, of course, they do continuously. British press actually reported a few years ago that Shin Bet actually set up that hijacking that led to the raid on Entebbe to make the Palestinians look bad and make Israel look good, and they made a movie out of it with Charles Bronson, and it was all just a complete hoax. The Palestinians didn't have anything to do with it. Israel's number one propaganda priority for all of these false flags is to make Palestine look bad so the world will turn a blind eye as Israel steals their country from them.
I've been doing a lot of research about Iran. And Israel wants to attack Iran, but they want to take out Syria because Syria has like a lot of missiles and it's right next to Israel's door. And so that's why they've been financing ISIS, and like the leaders in ISIS are like Israeli Mossad agents. Yeah,
once they get Assad out of Syria, if they can succeed, they're having serious trouble about it. They've been in it for 4 years. And they can't pull it off. But the theory is that once Syria is under their control, then they can attack Iran more or less with impunity. Of course, Israel's plan is to attack Iran and then let America step in and blunt the resulting retaliation. I mean, that's the reason they staged that whole assassination to get Lebanon out of Syria, because Lebanon and Syria were partners, and then they set up this assassination, and everybody was doing accusations to destabilize relations between the two countries. As soon as Lebanon was out, Israel went in. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right to the phones here to Jay in Maryland. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Jay, are you there? Oh, there you are.
Thanks for taking my call. I emailed you a couple of articles. I thought I'd just mention briefly to your audience.
Yeah, I did link to all three of them. They were very, very interesting, and I planned on talking about two of them later in the show.
Well, I won't steal your thunder then. I guess my point about all three of these was just how did we get to such a point of embracing stupidity in this country, and is there any way out of it?
Well, I think the shift to stupidity is really a way of avoiding dealing with the real problems that are going on. In a way, it's almost like a new superstition. Nobody wants to speak truth to power. Nobody wants to confront the realities of what's going on. A lot of people are too scared to even really think about how bad things have gotten. So they go off on these little sort of side trips, and they get all flustered and upset about, all kinds of things that are bad that are going on there. I mean, look at the fury over FIFA. Or FIFA, or however they pronounce it. Oh, there's corruption in FIFA. Oh my goodness! And they're out there with protest signs, and they finally convinced the president of FIFA to quit, and all the rest of that. Why aren't we seeing the same fury with Wall Street's crimes, which actually impact all of our lives? Unless you are a soccer fan or a soccer player, what they were doing with FIFA is irrelevant. It doesn't touch your life. And look at the media fury, and the U.S. government's getting in there to prove that they're tough on corruption, while turning a blind eye to all the corruption on Wall Street, where, you've got the top 5 biggest banks admitting they're rigging the markets and stealing from their investors and customers, but nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody's angry about it. The corporate media just looks the other way. That really is a symptom of psychological avoidance. They don't want to deal with the real things. I remember 21 years ago when I was still in Hollywood, just before I got blacklisted, and I was talking to people, and everybody in Hollywood likes to have a cause, deadbeat dads or, the baby seals. Oh, my goodness, they're clubbing the baby seals, which I'm not, I'm upset about that, too. But we were dealing with clear evidence of a murder committed in the White House, followed by a cover-up. But nobody wanted to deal with that because it's safe when you're in high dudgeon about baby seals or human-caused global warming or deadbeat dads because they can't fight back. But when you're talking about a government that is engaged in drug running itself, murder and other crimes, nobody wants to go near that because, wow, bad things could happen. And so a lot of these little stories that you're seeing are from journalists who are eager to get readership, but they know that there are a lot of lines and more every day they are not allowed to cross. And so they go out looking for this real bizarre stuff.
I couldn't believe it when I saw the headline. I think it was on the Washington Post maybe last week about the U.S. is determined to stamp out corruption in FIFA. I started laughing out loud. For the U.S. to be saying they're going to stamp out corruption in some other organization is like, Charles Manson giving anger management classes.
Yeah, really. Pot calling the kettle black here. Or, there's another way to look at it. The U.S. government is saying, hey, corruption is our business. It's our toif. You stay off of our toif. We do the corruption. We get rich. You're not allowed to get rich through corruption. Only we are allowed to do that.
That's well said. But anyway, I thought I'd end my call with just a little bit of levity, and a point of contention is that I've heard you make a couple Freudian slips as far as Prime Minister Harper.
Yes. And
referring to Harpo, and I take great offense because I'm a big Harpo fan. And
I apologize. I actually worked with his wife in Hollywood on a project. It was kind of cool getting all the inside stories about what life was like with him. And no, I'm not going to repeat them on the air because these secrets were entrusted to me in confidence. But, yeah, it was kind of fun and everything. And I meant no insult to the Marx brothers, who I love, and I apologize if I offended all the Marx fans out there.
Have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now then, we have seen a regurgitation of a lot of propaganda. They're trying to revive this whole thing about Flight 17, and gosh darn that Putin, he shot it down with his bear rifle. And it's sort of being accelerated by the fact that Malaysian Airlines, unfortunately, has been forced into bankruptcy because of both Flight 17 and Flight 370. So Russia is basically firing back. Now, if you will remember, not too long ago, there was an individual who came forward to say that he had seen Ukrainian Sukhois take off on some kind of a mission on the day of the Flight 17 crash. One of the planes came back with empty rails. The pilot was shaken, saying something about it being the wrong airplane. Okay? Now, this aviation armaments mechanic who used to be in the Ukrainian Air Force, Evgeny Agapov. He is now inside the Russian Federation. He crossed the border and sought asylum. He's afraid for his life because of what he knows, and basically came out and identified a gentleman by the name of Voloshin as the pilot who set out for the military task. Now, we've covered this before, but again, Voloshin was quoted by a lot of his colleagues saying the plane was at the wrong time or the wrong place. Okay, now, that kind of a statement means they were up there to shoot down some kind of a plane, and they got Flight 17 by mistake. Okay, so what other aircraft were up there? Painted white, with red and blue stripes, looking like a passenger airliner, and as it turns out, Russian President Putin was flying through the same area on that very same day, returning home from his 6-day visit to Cuba in South America. Now, Putin's presidential jet, it's not as grand as Air Force One, it's based on the Ilyushin 96 passenger aircraft. And it's painted with a color scheme very similar to Malaysian Airlines. And at a distance, they could have been confused for one another. So at this point, the obvious theory is Poroshenko wanted to murder Putin, claim it was a crash, to throw the Russian government into chaos, while Kiev reconquered the eastern Ukrainian republics. But they botched the operation. They shot down Flight 17 instead, and then tried to drop the blame on Russia in their panic. It's not the crime that gets you, it's the cover-up. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
Doing good.
Good. Boy, that's crazy. I have a question, but you would think Putin, with this, being a lifetime KGB, that he would have been a little more heads up with what was going on down there, but it's amazing.
He may have thought that was a line Poroshenko wasn't ready to cross.
Wow, he's slipping.
I don't think so. At that time, if you look at the context, things hadn't really started to heat up. I mean, Poroshenko had just come to power. He was trying to consolidate things, and we were only beginning to hear about the breakaway republics. The fighting was only just then starting. And, Putin may have just figured, he's not crazy enough to do that. Now he knows better. And now I'm sure the Russian aircraft are staying out of Ukrainian airspace at this point. Okay?
Yep. I got a question. Are you going to keep me on?
Yeah, I'm going to keep you on until after the commercial break. We'll be right back.
All right. Thanks.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. The phone lines are really loading up here. We're first going to go back to Mo in Florida. You had one more question.
Yeah, Michael, I got an email from Rebecca Roth with the Methodical Illusion book, and I was going to forward it to you. When I go on your website, it won't let me email you, and even the sign-up thing takes me to a fatal error.
Well, the sign-up thing is broken. The sign-up thing is broken. I mean, I'm in the middle of building a whole new WhatReallyHappened.com website. It's slow going. The theme that I used for the original What Really Happened has not been ported to Drupal 7, so I'm having to build this from scratch. It's huge amount of work. That's one of the reasons, though. The sign-up doesn't work. I don't know why it's not letting you email me, because it should just bring up your own local, on your computer, email client. But if you hit the donate button, there is a postal address there that you can use to send the book to, okay?
Okay, use the postal address?
Yeah, use the postal address in the donate page, and I will get that.
Okay, I'll try that, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Wes in Idaho. Aloha, Wes. Welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Thank you for drawing attention to the plight of the Palestinians. But what about the Boyers of South Africa? They've got Zuma actually singing songs that they're going to kill the Boer, the white African farmers. You must know about that?
Yeah, I've heard about that, and it's another case of blowback from botched policies. And unfortunately, the whole world right now is plunging into turmoil. I don't give as much attention to what's going on down there because we, the American taxpayers, aren't being forced to pay for it that I know of. My issue with the government of Israel is they do have nuclear weapons. They can cause a lot more trouble than the Zuma can on a global scale. And, of course, Israel's government has infiltrated and subverted the governments of many other Western nations, including Great Britain, France, Canada, here in the United States of America. They represent a clear and present danger to the peace and safety of the entire world.
Okay. I was going to mention Michael Collins Piper, a friend too, but I guess you got the notice as well as I did.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. We put up a bunch of stuff about him on whatreallyhappened.com, and we had him on the show many years ago, and it is very sad that he's not with us. Especially he died at a young age, 55. I mean, compared to me, that's a young age,
Yeah, younger than me. Okay, thank you, Michael.
All right, thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Mike in Canada. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, how you doing? It's been a while since we spoke.
Okay.
Anyways, I interviewed you a few years back, but I just wanted to bring your attention. I don't know if you've covered this. I only started listening to the show in the last 20 minutes, but the Canadian news media has been incessantly, every morning, I watch it for a good laugh, but they've been going on and on about this Truth and Reconciliation Commission between the government, the church, and the natives, and they're outright stating it that the government, in collusion with the churches and a few other agencies, tried to destroy the culture and the people of the Indigenous or First Nations people here, and the government is coming out and saying, look, we said we were sorry. So apparently you can start an organization here in Canada, you can steal people's kids, you can rape them, you can starve them to death, you can beat them half to death when they speak their language, bury them alive. You just got to say you're sorry.
Oh, yeah, well, our government does that all the time. I remember back when Bill Clinton was president and he signed that public law apologizing to the people of Hawaii for stealing their nation away from them. And the attitude was, we're really sorry. Look at our frowny face. We're really sorry we took your republic here. We're not going to give it back, but, we feel really bad about it. And we get that a lot from all of these people. And we only get these apologies when the evidence is so overwhelming of the wrongdoing. They can't stand up there and go on denying anymore. It's basically you caught us. We did bad things. We're sorry, but we're not going to give back what we stole.
Exactly. And so let's switch gears. The other thing I'd like to know, where is ISIS or ISIL or whatever they're calling themselves today, or the news is calling them? I want to know where they're getting all these orange jumpsuits. Because every time they execute somebody, they've got the Guantanamo orange jumpsuit, and they consider the logistics of importing orange jumpsuits into a war zone from somebody somewhere and using them just for public executions. It doesn't logistically make sense.
Well, let's be honest. All they have to do is get the orange cloth. Anybody who knows how to use a sewing machine can make a jumpsuit in about an hour's worth of time. They're not that difficult. It's not like it's tailored. Well, they're putting them in the orange jumpsuits as a deliberate reference to how prisoners were being treated at Abu Ghraib and all of the other CIA torture centers. The CIA started this thing, bright orange jumpsuits, so if they get over the fence, they're easy to see as they run away. And the use of the orange jumpsuits is deliberate because it is, it's a message. This is payback.
So you don't think that's deliberately set up for Western consumption?
Yes, it is.
Identify with it.
Yes, it is set up for Western consumption to send a message saying this is in retaliation for the CIA's torture of, all these other people.
Well, it looks more staged to me, but I'll let you have it. So, anyways, Mike, you take care. Great show today.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. And actually, if you look very closely at some of those orange jumpsuits in the pictures, it is obvious they're very hastily sewn together. They're not professionally produced jumpsuits like the CIA is able to afford with your tax dollars. Okay, boy, a lot of calls today. Steve in Florida. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. I had a question for you. I'm wondering, since really nobody's watching the nightly news, so anybody with a brain, they just have lost credibility. And so that means that they're losing advertising dollars.
Yes.
And if you see the commercials, it's just, your local car dealership or something like that. They're not getting the big bucks that they need. Not that they need it anymore.
Okay, well, let me stop something here right now, because the way the network TV works is on every station break, so many of the commercials have to come through from the network, and the rest of the commercial slots are sold by the local affiliate. That's how commercials for your local car dealer and grocery store get into the mix. It doesn't really indicate that the networks aren't getting the advertisers, but the advertising rates are set by the viewer numbers, and while they're constantly arguing over who's got the largest share of the audience, what nobody wants to talk about is total audience decline, which is almost 20 years now, as long as I've been doing what really happened. We've been seeing an overall decline in the viewership of the corporate media because nobody likes a liar. The New York Times is actually talking about having to go into bankruptcy now.
Right. Okay, well, the thing that I wanted to bring up is that, thanks for the correction there, but the thing that I wanted to bring up is that since nobody's watching it, money talks, as we know, wouldn't it be is it possible that the taxpayers could be paying for that to be aired?
Well, maybe not the taxpayers, but the corporations are definitely putting the money in there to keep these broadcasters on the air, to keep their message going out. Go back and look at the movie Network, where the guy's ratings were terrible, but the owner says, keep him on the air. He's putting out the message I want people to be thinking about. And all these network news operations, they're losing money hand over fist, but they are being paid to get out there and fight the information war with the lies. On our side, we're cheating. We're using the truth. That makes it easy. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, interesting little story. Russian prosecutors have confiscated books from a Jewish Chabad school in the city of Yekaterinburg. That's it, finally. And apparently there were complaints from people in the community that this Chabad school was teaching their students to hate all non-Jews in the curriculum. And apparently this got out because those students were coming out of that school and expressing that to other children in the neighborhood. And the parents said, what are they teaching these kids over at this school? And the prosecutors stepped on in. Now then, the United States claims they're winning the war against ISIS. This came from Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken, and saying, the U.S. is winning the war against ISIS. And Saddam had nuclear weapons, humans are warming the earth, the economy's doing great, the check is in the mail, and I promise I'll respect you in the morning. So nobody's buying this. Even Fox News had the gonadal tissue to step up and say Obama is being grilled on his claim that U.S. forces and airstrikes have killed 10,000 ISIS members dead. Because, hey, there are no bodies, there's no evidence. Maybe they brought down some of those Russian mobile crematoriums from Ukraine to get rid of the bodies. The lies are really uncoordinated, which is why we all recognize that it's just more propaganda, more bovine excrement. Now, over at RINF.com, there's a story. Former CIA spy says U.S. not seeking to defeat ISIS. Of course not. ISIS is working for the U.S. We have all the documentation that ISIS in Syria was created, funded, and trained by the U.S. as a proxy to get Bashar al-Assad out of his palace after 4 years of failed U.S. efforts to do that. And I am beginning to think that ISIS in Iraq, the goal there is to justify breaking Iraq into 3 chunks, which has long been on the agenda not only of the U.S. government, but of Israel. Because if we can take one big country and break it into lots of little tiny countries, they're easier to push around and bully and loot at will. Hezbollah has seized 15 positions on Arsal's outskirts. So things are heating up over there. And not too surprisingly, we're getting whining from the Israel media that ISIS is issuing a dire warning to Israel. They're basically telegraphing there's a false flag coming to reignite the war against the poor people of Gaza. And apparently the ISIS warning And this gets a little weird. If Hamas does not cease its crackdown on ISIS supporters in Gaza, ISIS says they will carry out rocket attacks against Israel. Yeah, well, if you're angry with Hamas, and of course we understand that if ISIS attacks Israel, Israel will say, oh, it's the Palestinians' fault, and they'll be off and running again. So, yeah, Israel's looking for another excuse to go on in and pound on the people of Gaza a little bit more. Now, up in Europe, okay, well, actually not in Europe, in Israel, Israel's defense establishment is having their big annual exhibition. And a lot of European nations are boycotting it because of what Israel has been doing in Gaza, the West Bank, to their governments. And this Israeli defense exhibition, or ISDEF, was boycotted by the French, British, German, and Scandinavians. And the Israelis are saying, it doesn't matter if they didn't show up. The exhibition is not a failure. But if you look at the photo of the exhibition flow that's in the article, those floors look pretty empty to me. If you've ever been to an industry convention, I used to go to SIGGRAPH all the time, they are crowded. Another article, this is over at Steve Amsel's Desert Peace, why BDS has replaced Iran as Israel's biggest existential threat. And he's basically pointing out that with Obama having bought Netanyahu's silence on Iran, Netanyahu needs to have something else to whine about, because if he can't whine and complain, his head will explode. And so that's why he's all of a sudden back on the boycott, divestment, sanctions maneuver. It's a threat to Israel's very existence. Because by its nature, Israel's government survives on constant complaints, constant fear-mongering, constant victimhood. They don't know any other way to run a country. They have to have an enemy even if they make it up. They have to have something to complain about. Now, Obama was quoted in the Israeli media as saying that he is going to cut U.S. support of the United Nations unless the United Nations stops being so anti-Semitic toward Israel and so biased, prejudiced against Israel. They're trying to head off the next push for Palestinian statehood. Meanwhile, former Israeli Premier Ehud Olmert has finally been sentenced to jail for fraud, breach of trust, for corruption when he was the trade and industry minister in the early 2000s. He got a total of 8 months in jail for massive, massive crimes and corruptions. It's good to be politically connected, I guess. So let's talk about the USA Freedom Act, NSA, and this dog and pony show that's going on. Story out of RINF.com. Unsatisfied with weak spy reforms, movement Snowden built, vows to fight on. I have a couple of problems with the headline. First of all, the USA Freedom Act is not a reform. At best, it's a relabeling. They just shuffled around who it is that is violating the Fourth Amendment and spying on you. There are no other real changes to any of that. The USA Freedom Act is reducing your freedom. We see way too many of these bills come through Congress that has a title that is the exact opposite of what the bill actually does. And Snowden, no question, major hero for popularizing awareness of all this spying, but he certainly wasn't first. William Binney was before him. We were talking about Echelon all the way back to the early days of this website. Constant spying going on here. And yeah, we are unsatisfied. This is not a resolution to say we're going to change who's violating the Constitution. The solution is you go back to abiding by that Constitution, because that Constitution and the Bill of Rights is the original contract with America. The government is the legal, legitimate government only when it complies with those restrictions in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The Constitution isn't there to tell the government what it can do. That Constitution is there to tell the government what it may not do. And when the government steps outside those bounds, it becomes illegitimate, it becomes criminal, it becomes unconstitutional. Now, another story over at Blacklisted News. Idiotic CIA director, and he was, says even debating mass surveillance is aiding the terrorists. We can't do that right now. We can't even question mass surveillance. It's helping the terrorists. We have to spy on all the law-abiding Americans to protect the country from crime and terror. No, because the law-abiding citizens aren't committing crimes or acts of terror. This is really getting Orwell. And we already proved the NSA can't do a thing against real criminals and terrorists. Now, given that all of this mass spying hasn't actually cracked any major cases, according to admissions from the FBI and the Department of Justice, TSA hasn't found a terrorist in 14 years of operation, how does a debate on these unconstitutional actions somehow help terrorism? He's grasping at straws, is what he's doing here. And one more thing. The recent test of TSA showed 95% of the bombs and guns got through. With a high failure rate like that, we have to look at the fact that there hasn't been any terror attacks on airplanes. And the only way to explain that is there are no real terrorists, because they would have had a 95% chance of getting through to their targets. And if they didn't, just set off the bomb at the TSA gate. The only terrorists running around are all these patsies created by the government, or actors like Adam Gadon/Adam Perlman, to scare us all into pouring our money and the blood of our children into the war machine. If you think about it at all, it doesn't make any sense other than it's fake, fraud, deception to trick you into obedience and service to wars of conquest. Got to take a break for our top of the hour news, and we'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to our show today, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is still in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, over the last couple of weeks, there has been a growing awareness that something is going on in the skies over many American cities, where people were noticing these small aircraft, mostly Cessnas, that just seem to circle and circle and circle and circle and circle. And now we're starting to find out what's going on. There was a story over at the CBS affiliate in Minnesota, where this 23-year-old independent journalist, using online sources on the web for tracking aircraft, confirmed these aircraft were circling. He got the tail numbers, traced them to what turned out to be shell companies that were sharing resources with the Department of Justice, and tracked it all the way back to the FBI. And the FBI is now admitting they are the ones who are flying airplanes over American cities. They won't say what for. There are strange antennas on these Cessnas, and they're just circling around and circling around. They won't say what it's for, except it's for an ongoing investigation. Really, you're investigating an entire city? Doesn't sound too good to me. Now, the first thing that comes to mind is the FBI may be testing a system to locate somebody through their cell phone if the cell phone network itself has been shut off during a government crackdown or something. So should that happen, if you're doing something the government probably won't like, and the phones are not working anyway, just go ahead and duct tape your cell phone to a stray dog, just to keep life interesting for them. But again, violation of the Fourth Amendment for them to be spying on us all the time. Now, turning to the economy, the situation with Greece looks to be deteriorating very, very rapidly. The Troika, as of today, presented their final offer. And what the Troika did, the money junkies, got tired of listening to Greece talking about the odious part of the debt, tired about, you're starving us. They don't want to hear it. Just give us our money now. And so apparently the money junkies just wrote out their own agreement. This is what's going to happen, with an X where Tsipras is supposed to sign it if he wants to avert a default in 3 days' time. Because by signing this agreement and plunging Greece into even more debt, they'll give him the money to pay off the current payment. That's it. They're loan sharking them. That's exactly what's going on. They're loan sharking the entire nation. And Europe's getting in high dudgeon saying, Tsipras' proposals are they're unacceptable here. How dare you say you shouldn't pay debts created through fraud and corruption? And everybody's basically saying an agreement is unlikely, and we might see a derivatives nightmare result. Meanwhile, the European Union has given their member nations 2 months to adopt new rules for bail-ins in all of the European Union nations. Remember when they did it to Cyprus, they called it a haircut, or a scalping, or a castration, depending upon your point of view. And everybody said, oh, it's one time only. Well, it was an emergency, never happen again. And here we have the EU ordering the member nations of the European Union within the next 2 months to put in the rules that will allow banks to just help themselves to savings accounts to deal with cash shortfalls. Now remember, last November, here in the United States of America, the Congress, the finest Congress that money can buy, changed the rules for banks in the United States of America. Savings account holders have been redefined as unsecured investors in the bank in which they put their savings account. Meaning, if the bank is losing money, you as a savings account holder are now expected to share in the losses. Meaning they can help themselves to the money in your savings account. Given how little interest those savings accounts are actually paying, you're probably better off, like the people of Greece, just get your money out of there, put it somewhere where it's not in some money junkie's computer network, so that they can help themselves when things really start coming apart. This is why one of the reasons they're pushing cashless society. The wealth has to be in the possession of the banks. You're not allowed to touch your own wealth. You will be dependent on the banks to keep track of your wealth. Enforced dependency is slavery, remember? Alrighty, now over in Nigeria, and this may be the reason why they're getting all of this international condemnation by Amnesty International. Nigeria just arrested 6 of their central bankers for currency rigging. They're calling it a mega scam involving U.S. equivalent of $40 million. And I wonder if that's why Amnesty all of a sudden started going and saying, oh, you're bad people. You can't arrest bankers. They did it in Iceland. They're doing it in Nigeria. They executed one in Iran, executed another one in China. The rest of the world is way ahead of the United States of America in how to get all this money junkie corruption under control. So anyway, another article coming out of SHTFplan.com. The ultimate call. Will the Federal Reserve be caught without gold if there's a rush of repatriation? Yes, of course they will. They already have. We saw that when Germany tried to repatriate their gold, and they got the big stall. We talked about it on America's Book of Secrets on the History Channel. And when Germany started getting some of their gold back, not only was it not the original stamped and serial numbered bullion bars that were placed there for storage, it was just new blocks of gold, which turned out to be only 95% pure. And Germany only got a tiny fraction of their gold back. And Germany's Bundesbank, which is more loyal to the banker cartel than it is to the country in which it operates, was out there telling the German government, you don't need to worry. Honest, it's all okay. Remember that editorial came out of CNBC where the editorial writer said it doesn't matter if the gold really isn't there anymore. As long as it's on the books, as long as it's on the ink and paper stuff, it's really okay. You don't need to have your actual physical gold. Well, somebody sure as heck got it. Somebody wanted it. Remember the James Bond movie Goldfinger? I hate to tell you this, somebody really has robbed Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve. Now, Texas just passed a law setting up their own internal bullion repository and making silver and gold legal tender within their state. They didn't need a law to do that, by the way. Tender is whatever people agree to use for exchange of services and payment, because if you look carefully at that pretty printed piece of paper coming out of the Federal Reserve, there's a little comment on the top. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. The word that is missing, the money junkies would have to have it there, is only. That this note is the only legal tender for all debts, public and private. But while that word is not on this, you can carry out commerce using whatever medium of exchange you want to. Now, the Federal Reserve doesn't like that. That's why they're coming down on alternative currencies as hard as they can. Remember how they went after the Liberty dollar and the Ron Paul dollar? Because it's got the word dollar on there. And that means they're trying to counterfeit. Now, anybody who actually looked at those coins could immediately see they do not mimic or represent U.S. coinage. I personally think George Bush got upset that they put Ron Paul's face on a coin. And he threw a tantrum and said, you go get those people. If anybody's going to have their face on a coin, it's going to be me. And you got realized, I got to work on my Bush accent since we've got another one running for the election next year. All righty, we are, and by the way, apparently the U.S. government has lost 7 of the records of the Fort Knox gold audits. Whoopsie, they were here just a minute ago. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over at ADP, they're reporting that jobs growth in the country has slowed for 5 months in a row, something not seen since 2008. I would even question the claim that there has been any job growth at all, given the documented distortion of the unemployment numbers by the U.S. government. They're still claiming 5-6% unemployment in a nation with some 94 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job. Now, we have been bemoaning the loss of many iconic American businesses. Radio Shack, for one, Office Depot, and now it looks like Toys R Us may be in serious trouble. They're struggling. They're not in bankruptcy yet. They're not closing, but they're in serious trouble. And they're claiming it's from online competition, and maybe that is a factor. Toys R Us has just hired a former Domino's Pizza executive with no toy retailing experience at all as their new CEO. David Brandon. He was the former CEO and chairman of Domino's Pizza, and he's chairman and CEO of Toys R Us as of July 1st, succeeding Antonio Ursule, who's retiring. Now, every once in a while I'll go to the local Toys R Us, because we have lots of little keiki, which children, that we get birthday and Christmas gifts for. And Toys R Us has definitely changed since I was younger, when it first started up. And they had a lot more toys that were, how shall I put this, constructive. A lot of science toys, erector sets, things that encouraged kids to be creative and build things and make things. And these days, when you walk through Toys R Us, it's almost entirely branded merchandise from movies, TV shows, celebrities, rock stars. Their science toy section is all but gone. You used to be able to buy a kit where you could make your own clock, which I thought that was kind of cool. And I remember I was looking at what passes for a chemistry set at Toys R Us. Now, when I was a kid, all those many years ago, I could go over to Toy City in West Covina, which isn't there anymore. And in the back, they had a big rack full of jars and bottles where you could buy chemicals. And they had labware. And you could buy what you needed for experiments you came up with yourself. And you could learn and develop and invent. And it was really cool. And yes, there was stuff there that was hazardous, but it was assumed that you knew what you were doing. Now, the last chemistry set I saw at Toys R Us, there were no free chemicals. There were bits of paper blotter pre-saturated with chemicals to follow the instructions in the book to do the experiments they designed for you. No way that you could go out and start exploring for yourself what chemistry does and how it works. And I think this political correctness and everybody's safety and big nanny state has actually killed a lot of the charm that made Toys R Us work in the first place. All right, apparently we have a caller on the line who's got something to add for Toys R Us. Alan up in Toronto, aloha, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you're talking about, basically the way kids are being dumbed down now, all the creativity is being taken out of things. In the name of corporate profits, I would assume.
Well, I don't think it's just corporate profits because, Radio Shack originally got very rich and successful being the go-to place for people who wanted to build their own radios, their own CBs, their own shortwaves. Heathkit was another one. I love the stuff that came out of there. And you can't find that stuff.
Great.
And with the demise of Radio Shack, there is literally no place between here and Honolulu where you can go and get parts for anything. If you go into the local Best Buy, it's all prepackaged. You will buy this, you will plug it in, you will enjoy it. You're not allowed to play with it or get inside of it in any way. And it's very frustrating for somebody, who's an amateur scientist such as myself. And yes, I'm able to go out onto eBay and get the goodies that I need for my little radio telescope experiments and whatnot. But it's certainly not convenient. And I think, even with the science and technology and even the artwork, it just isn't there anymore. It's all buying, a toy that looks like Spider-Man or Iron Man or the latest rock star or whoever it is that's being pushed at us from the Disney Channel. And that stuff is really very uninteresting. And worse, it's teaching our kids to spend their lives wanting to be just like somebody else, so they miss that grand adventure of discovering the amazing person they could potentially be.
Yeah, and, I have a granddaughter, and she has, a toy cell phone. And I said, well, what are you doing? Why would you buy her a toy cell phone, for crying out loud?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
and it doesn't, if it really actually worked, that's one thing. We bought one of our nieces a child's toy camera, but it's a real camera, and we said, you will send us pictures from this thing, which she did. But yeah, and I understand there's a little bit of make-believe and everything going on, but you could take an old sponge and pretend that's a cell phone. You don't need a cell phone with Cinderella on it or the Japanese characters the anime characters on there.
Mike, I used to put a towel around my neck, pretend I was Superman, for crying out loud.
Well, I did Batman myself, because.
Yeah, you never see that. I don't even see kids playing outside anymore. They're at home on their cell phones or on, their PlayStations, whatever. And it's just nuts. There's snowbanks in the winter. There's no holes in them, no forts, no snowball fights, nothing.
Yeah, it's a loss. It is really a loss. Not just to their self-direction creativity. They're literally being trained not to think for themselves about what they want to do. Oh, it is this time. I must watch this show. I must go play this game. I must do this. And it really is destroying initiative and independence in our children. And that's something that is going to work against us if we're really going to try and regain a position in the technological global marketplace.
Well, all I got to say is, good luck with that because, over on the other side of the ocean, they're really kicking our butt here, and it's not getting any better.
No, it really isn't. And I've seen a lot of the Chinese students just doing amazing things. And yes, we've got some good kids here. There's a lot of robotics challenges. They actually had a festival for student robot builders at the local shopping mall, and that was impressive, except that all of these robots were built out of this one standard kit. The idea of people just going into their garage with a bunch of old food cans and some motors that they took out of vacuum cleaners and building anything, that's just not the model anymore. They're buying somebody else's idea of what a robot should be and put it together. And if we kill the sense of innovation in our own children, then we have killed our future ability to compete in the global marketplace. But it makes the politicians and the money junkies comfortable, so we're going to go on doing it. Thanks to Common Core. Okay.
I feel bad about that.
Don't get me started on Common Core. We'll be here for the rest of the day. All right, Alan, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Little bit of information you might want to keep in mind, especially as we head into a new election year. During his term in office to date, Barack Obama has overseen the accumulation of $6.5 trillion in new debt. 6.5. Total accumulated debt of the 43 previous presidents combined is only $6.3 trillion. Obviously, the debt situation is completely out of control. Obviously, the federal government has no interest in balancing the books and paying its debt. They're just going to dump it on future generations of Americans. They've been doing it for 100 years since the creation of the Federal Reserve. That's how they get by. We're going to borrow and spend, and, we're going to have a really good time, and, we'll just pass it on forward, and when it all falls apart, somebody else will be in office to go down in the history books as the person who ruined the nation. I'll be fine. I'll have statues and gold things on the wall and the rest of it. They've kicked that can so much down the road, it doesn't even look like a can anymore. It looks like an old discarded gum wrapper. All righty, we're going to grab ourselves a quick phone call. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Before Toys R Us, we had Kitty City, and before Kitty City, there was Sears and Roebuck. And in the late 60s, I had a Sears and Roebuck chemistry set with a metallic trifold cabinet with all sorts of little white plastic bottles of chemicals, test tubes.
Oh, I had one of those, too. They were great.
Yes. I had the balance in there and a book with all kinds of instructions. It had red litmus paper, blue litmus paper, phenolphthalein, and little scoops, and it told you exactly how to do things. It taught you principles about things like thermodynamics and ionic interactions and then stuff. And I never burned down the house or poisoned anything or flushed anything explosive down the toilet. It was perfectly great and educational. I also had their microscope.
They used to actually trust the kids have common sense and that the parents would be there overseeing them. A lot of people don't remember this, but Gilbert actually put out a nuclear radiation laboratory kit as a toy that came with radioisotopes, a spinthariscope, an electroscope, and a bunch of other stuff to demonstrate principles of nuclear physics. I mean, because they figured back then that, any kid interested in this as a toy is going to know what they're doing, know to be cautious. The parents are going to be watching. And, they could trust people with this kind of stuff because we were aware. We had common sense. We knew not to do stupid things. And these days...
And we knew how to read, and we could follow instructions. And look, it's fizzing, and it's changing color, and it's getting warm, and oh, I see. I had a microscope from Sears and Roebuck, and with pre-mounted slides and make your own slides, and I had a steam engine where you heated a little tank of water with sterno, and it moved a piston and spun a wheel.
Oh, I love those. Yeah, all of that stuff. And, you didn't have horrible accidents because people understood that, what you're working with has a potential for danger and harm if you are not careful. And we grew up saying, be careful. It's just like, you'd get a gun on your 12th birthday. And they'd say, this is serious. Be careful. And we were all careful. And, very rarely did anything bad happen. Today, kids are growing up with this illusion that Big Daddy government has made the world completely safe and fluffy for them. And they just go on out and do very stupid things because they're absolutely convinced nothing bad can happen to them. And then it happens to them and the lawsuits start flying and, the liberals go on screaming again about we need more controls on the lives of people because they can't care for themselves. Well, the reason modern American kids can't care for themselves is they haven't been allowed to learn how. And that is something that is really missing from our science education, from our toys, from the familiarity and availability with guns. I mean, when I was a kid, a Boy Scout knife was an 8-inch sheath knife, not this little Swiss Army knife with a branded label on it. I mean, you had one of those as well. But, I mean, it is the nanny state carried to an extreme, and it's producing a paralyzed, ineffective population at a time when we're trying to figure out a way how to get our economy going again. And this is one of the reasons why corporations are having to get those H-1B visas to get all these foreign-trained people to come in to do the work. They can't find Americans that are really smart enough, aware enough, have the common sense to actually do the job and not mess up something important in the process. Because they're absolutely convinced the world has been made safe and secure and fluffy and padded and foolproof, and that's impossible because fools are very, very creative. All righty, now then, getting on back to Obama. If you have an Obamacare-compliant insurance policy, get ready for a big shock. As of the 1st of next year, the insurance companies are going to be hiking the rates in some places by as much, more than 60%. 60%. This is how the government puts the screws to you. Order you to buy this product and then raise the price on the product. There's no more competition. They don't have to compete for your business. You are ordered by the government to buy this, so of course the prices can go up. And we knew this was going to happen based on what happened with auto insurance when that was made mandatory. And I'm sure over at the White House they're saying, we got you now. And, of course, if you don't have Obamacare-compliant insurance, the IRS penalties are going up by a huge amount next year. It's kind of a weird situation. People cannot afford these high-priced insurance policies. So the IRS is going to take more of the money they don't have anyway, because if they had the money, they'd buy the policies. Everybody is thinking immediate gain, immediate objective. Nobody in the federal government at all, since Ron Paul, is looking at the overview of what's best for the nation and its people as a whole. Everybody's just out for themselves. The next stockholders report, the next paycheck, the next bonus, the next big score, the next election. That's it. And they're all following their own little agendas. And they're still worshiping at the altar of Adam Smith that being personally guilty improves society as a whole. And that is nonsense. Mathematician, Nobel Prize-winning mathematician John Nash, who recently passed away in a tragic car accident, his doctoral thesis proved Adam Smith was wrong, that everybody acting in their own self-interest was destructive to society as a whole, could lock it up, which is exactly what's happening. All righty, we're going to grab a phone call here. Eric in Nebraska, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. A little over a year ago, Costco had to get rid of like 1 million tubs of peanut butter because of a sealing issue, I think it was.
Okay, this is a very muted phone call. Could you back up and speak a little louder and a little more slowly so we can understand you?
Yeah, a little over a year ago,
yep.
Costco had to get rid of about 1 million tubs of peanut butter because of like the poor sealing.
Yes.
And I think you took issue with it because you think it probably could have been donated. Well, I would assume that if they would have donated that, they would have had lawsuits, coming down on them for peanut anaphylaxis. I would think.
Well, no, wait a minute, okay? Peanut anaphylaxis has got nothing to do with whether the peanut butter is properly sealed or not. Peanut anaphylaxis is a side effect of the use of peanut oil as a vaccine adjuvant.
I understand that.
Okay.
But if a homeless person went to a shelter and got free peanut butter that had Costco on it, and they got sick, there'd definitely be a lawsuit, I think.
I think it would be tossed right out of court, because if somebody has peanut anaphylaxis and they eat peanut butter, that's their own responsibility. I mean, you can't sue the peanut butter makers for peanut anaphylaxis if people are dumb enough to eat it. And yes, you're right, the lawyers will love to make a lawsuit out of anything they think they can make a fast buck on. But, with so much hunger going on in this country, it's time to start cutting some slack to those of us who are trying to feed these hungry people. Eric, got to let you go and take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And getting on back to Obamacare, as you know, this month, the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on a matter of the exact definition of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that may result with 6.4 million people losing their Obamacare subsidies because of the wording related to the state exchanges. And they're going to try and patch and fix and whatever. But I think at this point it's safe to say Obamacare was a complete and total failure. It did not make health care more affordable. Health care is actually more expensive. The insurance policies are more expensive. The deductibles are sky high. People are actually staying away from doctors because they can't afford the bills just to go for checkups. Or if they're just a little ill, or it's a little injury, they stay home and take care of themselves. Everybody has suffered under this. The insurance companies didn't make the windfall profits they thought they were going to. And The U.S. government didn't get the windfall of tax revenues they thought they were going to get. Obamacare is a failure for both its overt and covert purposes, and yet we live under a government that is institutionally incapable of admitting they made a mistake and turning around and saying, all right, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. Because ego's involved. It's got my name on it. It's going to be good. We will keep going no matter what a disaster it is. They're handling Obamacare. The closest analogy I can think of is Captain E.J. Smith on the bridge of the Titanic staring down that iceberg saying, I'm going to move you. Now, a lot of people have been talking about how wealthy the United States is. And it is when you include the wealth of the 1% of the 1%. We have, I think, the third worst wealth inequality of any industrialized nation. And the reality is having all the money piled onto those very, very rich families cannot support the economy because there are not enough hours in the day for them to go out and spend enough money to keep the entire economy percolating along. It just doesn't work. You need to have everybody with adequate wealth, earnings, salaries, wages to go out and buy things to keep the economy going along. And as it turns out, looking at the story coming out of Investment Watch blog, the rich are starting to pull back from spending a lot of money. They're getting nervous now. The 2%, less the 1% of the 1%, they're starting to get nervous. They're hanging on to their cash. Now, the Atlanta public school systems have announced, due to financial constraints, they will be cutting all music programs and letting go all their music teachers starting this autumn. School year 2015-2016. No more music programs. I'll bet you the ROTC is still alive and well. We've had another one of these strange banker deaths. A Goldman Sachs analyst has been found dead in his car. Apparently was complaining to his family that he was having to work 100-hour weeks. And, of course, it's been declared to be a suicide, even though there was no suicide note. A lot of these people are turning up dead. And what's really the scandal, a lot of these corporations, J.P. Morgan, will take out life insurance policies on their staffers to be paid to the corporation if the staffer dies. Oh, we're a couple of $1 million short on the payroll this week. All right, well, knock off old Joe there. We don't really need him anyway. A lot of the people in J.P. Morgan's tech division are very, very nervous at how many of their people have met with strange, mysterious ends. J.P. Morgan apparently has a total of $197 million in life insurance on their own employees. I don't think their families have that much coverage. But how would you feel working for a money junkie corporation where you know everybody above you is a greedy bastard, knowing that they actually get a couple of $1 million if you get bumped off? Try and maintain a Zen-like calm in the office with that hanging over your head here. Now, speaking of cash, there's another story coming out of Washington Times about how the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation cashed in from interests in Sweden. At the same time, Sweden was lobbying Hillary Rodham Clinton's State Department to get an exception to sanctions regarding its thriving business with Iran. It's almost an extortion racket. You set up a big fence, a big cage, and you lock it. And then you sell copies of the key to people for lots and lots of money. It's like the Catholic Church used to do with indulgences. It's all a sin. If you do it, you're going to go to heck, and you will burn forever. Except for the rich nobility who would come in, throw a few coins at the priest, and the priest would say, all right, you're forgiven this one time. God will indulge your little sin for this weekend. Have a good time. Send postcards. Now, Mike Huckabee, I have to shake my head at this one. He was apparently at this National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville, and it's a very religiously conservative area, and he was poking fun at the transgender community and out there joking, saying that back in high school, if he'd known that he could shower with the girls by claiming he was transgender, he would have. I get to see all the wet, naked girls. This is Mike Huckabee. And, of course, I'm reading this story, and the first thing I can think of is, okay, Mike, can we get back to the wars and the economy as reasons why we should or should not vote for you? But what an absurd statement. And I understand to him it's funny, it's a joke, but where's your proprietary? Do we want a person with this kind of sensibility of what is appropriate public commentary in the Oval Office? I don't think so. Guy's a joke here. Now, getting on over to Dennis Hastert. As you're probably already aware, he's been indicted under the USA Patriot Act, which he helped ramrod through Congress. Talk about hoisting with your own petard. And it involves apparently a grand total of some $3 million he had to pay to one of his former students who was blackmailing him over the fact that Hastert sexually molested him when he was back being a teacher. And so now this is all going to court. And unfortunately, the judge assigned to the case, U.S. District Judge Thomas Durkin of Chicago, is a past contributor to Hastert's election campaigns. I don't think he's disinterested. I don't think he's impartial. They don't even try and hide the corruption anymore. Another story, and this gets even more bizarre. Apparently, David Axelrod is reporting that Obama made a comment to David Axelrod that he, Obama, is the closest thing to a Jew that has ever sat in the Oval Office. You know, along with this claim that he's taught the world to respect America, we're winning against ISIS. I think this guy needs some psychotherapy, but that's okay. Obamacare will cover it. Wait a minute, aren't they all exempt from Obamacare in the federal government? Now, you've probably been hearing this story. They've been pounding this all day. Boston terror suspect planned to behead police officers. They're out there with this huge story, and because the suspect was shot and killed, they can say whatever they want, and nobody's going to come back and say, no, you're wrong, this is what was going on. Could have been another one of these FBI patsies. But what I take away from this is they're trying to build public sympathy for those poor, beleaguered peace officers to offset their image of absolute unbridled brutality against the American people. And I don't think it's going to work. People just aren't even paying attention anymore. I'm sure there's probably a lot of people who are out there saying, you know, the police deserve it after all the stuff they've been doing to the American people. But it feels like they're exploiting it to try and say, you should feel sorry for the police. You should not object when they come over and tase you and flashbang your babies and everything. They're just doing their job. And by the way, we're hearing that from Baltimore. Crime in Baltimore is going right through the roof. The police have put out the word. They're not going to be out there trying to stop the criminals because they're more afraid of the politicians than they are of the criminals. They're trying to send a message. If you want us to protect you from crime, you're going to have to put up with the fact that we're going to beat the crap out of a bunch of you. That's the deal. No more peace officers, no more to protect and to serve. The new motto of the American police is, we treat you like a king, as in Rodney King. You know, you're going to have to take the bad with the good. We'll fight crime, but yeah, we're going to be breaking your skulls from time to time. Just goes part of the package there. What can I tell you? Alrighty, we're coming up here on our top of the hour news break. When we come back, more developments from that weird case with the live anthrax. Rand Paul is hopping back on the let's blame Saudi Arabia for 9/11 bandwagon. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And getting on back to the Clinton Foundation. Story just came in here. This is coming out of Investment Watch blog. And apparently the Clinton Foundation is refusing to release the names of 1,076 secret foreign donors. Now, back on April 28th, the Washington Post and Bloomberg News were both reporting that hidden Clinton Foundation foreign donors were bundled into a single recorded donation from the Clinton Guistra Enterprise Partnership. This is a Canadian charity established by Canadian mining magnate Frank Giostra and Bill Clinton in 2007. And they donated, reportedly, a single $25 million donation. But it's come out that $25 million donation comes from 1,100 people that are being hidden. And more than a month after this story broke, only 24 of the names of those donors have been released. meaning there are 1,076 donors they are hiding from the American people. Why might that be? Well, as a matter of fact, one of the things we uncovered back when Bill and Hillary were in the White House is this amazing photograph of then First Lady Hillary Clinton posed before the White House Christmas tree with Jorge Cabrera, a known cocaine smuggler and Clinton donor. And we know the Clintons were neck deep in that gun and drug-running CIA operation centered on Mena, Arkansas, that eventually was exposed as part of Iran-Contra. And all of that stuff about Whitewater, Flowerwood, Castle Grande, Morgan Guarantee, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority was the money laundry, money growing machine that was set up. And it really was a scam. And the way it would work is the cash from all the cocaine running would be deposited in a targeted savings and loan association. Okay? Then they would form a shell company that would go and borrow the money back out using a compromised bank executive. The shell company would fold. The savings and loan got into trouble. They were all being bailed out by the Resolution Trust Corporation at taxpayer expense to make good on those deposits, because the people who had pulled this scam off were still on the books at the SNL for the original cash deposits. There was land flipping going on, all kinds of stuff. Estimates right now are, despite Hillary's claims of leaving the White House broke and in debt, estimates of their current personal fortune run to $2 billion. And Hillary's out there trying to claim that she's just ordinary people. I'm poor, Bill is poor, the upstairs maid is poor, the chauffeur is poor, the lawyer is poor, the cook is poor, my publicist is poor, they're all poor, 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 poor. Now, as you heard on the SRN news break, the scandal about the shipping of live weaponized anthrax spores around the world continues to grow. A total of 51 laboratories are now acknowledged to have received these live weaponized anthrax spores, thinking they were getting dead spores to test anthrax detection treatment systems with. Apparently, it's reached the point where the Pentagon may have sent some of that live anthrax to itself. They were going to use it to calibrate the sensors at the Pentagon that detect an anthrax attack. Which means at some point they were out there just flinging this stuff around to see if the sensors went off. Bunch of Keystone cops over there, actually. Now then, I want to get on to Rand Paul here. Now, I'm not a big Rand Paul supporter. He is not his father's son, as far as I can tell. In fact, I personally am of the opinion Rand Paul has got daddy issues. He wants to eclipse Ron Paul, and he doesn't care what compromises he has to make to do it. He wants to go further than Daddy did. He wants to be the president where Daddy didn't quite make it. And riding high on the tide of approval for his trying to stand up against the NSA, even though he, in the end, failed. He didn't accomplish a darn thing, but he got a lot of media attention, a lot of press. And now he's jumping on board this campaign to declassify the 28 pages of the 9/11 document, which blames Saudi Arabia for 9/11. Things like this is why I never trusted Rand and will not. All of the available evidence points to the U.S. and Israel as the perpetrators of the new Pearl Harbor, as it was described by the Project for the New American Century. And originally it was reported those 28 pages did implicate Israel and apparently have been rewritten. There's a new version of them out there. We're going to fight to get them out there. And it's a bit of a dodge. They're trying to get the American people to scream, declassify them, declassify them. And they'll go, oh, well, if that's what you want. And see, it blames Saudi Arabia. So they can justify another war of conquest in the Middle East. So I want to scotch that one right now. Okay? A little bit of common sense. We don't need to go into facts and evidence and the rest of it. Just stop for a moment. Look at how much money Saudi Arabia makes off the United States of America as part of the petrodollar deal. Look how much of that money Saudi Arabia has invested back in the United States of America and would lose carrying out some kind of a terror attack. Saudi Arabia is not going to sour their relations with the United States. They're making huge amounts of money off the U.S. from this deal. They don't want that to go away. If Saudi Arabia wanted to hurt the United States of America, they don't need to fly airplanes into skyscrapers to do it. All they have to do is take their money back as quickly as they can. Just pull it out of the U.S. financial system, and the damage to the U.S. financial system would make 9/11 look like a speed bump in comparison, and it would be perfectly legal for Saudi Arabia to do that. Which is why we know that the claim Saudi Arabia was behind 9/11 has no more basis in fact than the claim that Saddam had nuclear weapons, or that Assad gassed his own people, or that there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, and honest, the Lusitania was not carrying any weapons. And Pearl Harbor was really a surprise. Honest, trust us. It's another dodge. And remember, to find out if you are being fed a lie, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Saudi Arabia to carry out a 9/11 style attack on the United States. They have plenty of financial incentive not to. And if they wanted to hurt America, all they got to do is take their money back. Perfectly legal to do. It doesn't make sense. It never did. And the fact that Rand Paul is now on board this blame Saudi Arabia for 9/11 absolutely discredits him. Now, we're getting another report out of here. This is out of the Telegraph in Great Britain. It's amazing how much of this stuff is only available in the foreign press. The CIA's torture report, which has only been released in excerpted form, it's now leaking out that the CIA torture methods used on these people was more brutal and sadistic than the Senate excerpt disclosed. And newly declassified accounts of the torture of Majid Khan, who was a high-value detainee, show how he was repeatedly sexually assaulted, hung from a beam for several days, non-stop, half-drowned in tubs of freezing water. All of these are tortures. There's no gray area here. The U.S. government uses torture. They tortured innocent Iraqis to death to find nuclear weapons that never existed. For all you Kafka fans out there. Is this a government you can be proud of? I don't think so. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Lester Leroy Bauer. He is Texas' longest death row inmate. He was sentenced on April 28, 1984 to death by lethal injection for the murder of 4 people, 2 of them former law enforcement officers. And the trial is, well, as Washington Post even puts it, it's everything that's wrong with the death penalty. Because there are reasons to think that Bauer is innocent. He's certainly maintained his own innocence all these years. And the original trial was flawed. The prosecutors withheld exculpatory evidence. Witnesses have come forward saying they know who actually killed these 4 men, and it wasn't him. And remember what I said about government being unable to admit error or mistake. The Texas courts are acknowledging that had this evidence been at the trial, it might have changed the outcome. But since it wouldn't guarantee a different outcome, they have refused a new trial all this time, since 1984. Unless the United States Supreme Court steps in, Lester Bauer will die tonight by lethal injection. There is no question there is a reasonable doubt in this case. There is no question he is being railroaded to his execution by a government court system that doesn't want to admit they make mistakes, and yet we know they do. And this is why all jokes about tarring and feathering and burning at the stake and crucifixion and all the rest of it aside, I cannot and will not support a death penalty. Because until we can restore life to those it is wrongfully taken from, we shouldn't take it in the first place. And they're going to do it tonight. I've read over this case. I've looked at all the information. The fact that the prosecution withheld exculpatory evidence from the defense is, of itself, should be grounds to overturn the conviction and call for a new trial. That witnesses have come forward saying they know who committed the murders and it wasn't him establishes a reasonable doubt. But we live in an age where the government is desperate to maintain its illusion of infallibility, for which they will gladly sacrifice an innocent life. I hope the Supreme Court steps in. They need to. Even if they do, this man has spent his entire life since 1984 on death row. There's no way they can give that back to him. It's been more than 30 years, more than half his life. And the reality is, yes, the government does make mistakes. It convicts innocent people. It executes innocent people. And its solution to the problem is not to fix the system, but to just try and cover it up. They did that with James Earl Ray. They did it with Leonard Peltier. They did it with Mumia al-Jabbar. And they're going to go on doing it because they don't have a reason to change the way they do things, because it works for them. Now, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call here. John in Barbados. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael. Aloha. Thanks for having me. This death penalty thing is ridiculous. So many times, even in Britain, they executed the innocent person. And at least now in the UK, there is no death penalty.
Most industrialized nations no longer have a death penalty. The U.S., along with having the highest percentage of incarcerated people of any industrialized nation, still does have a death penalty. And the reality is it's not a deterrent because it is so long between the commission of the crime and the carrying out of the sentence that it really loses its deterrent value, which is supposed to be, in theory, the reason for a death penalty. But most people committing crimes don't expect to get caught, especially if they're Wall Street bankers or movie stars or politicians. And so it really doesn't work.
Well, I don't think so-called Zarniev expected to be tried for murder. I mean, it's this man is so innocent, it's just unbelievable.
Oh yeah, he wasn't supposed to leave that boat alive. That's the problem. You know, he got out of that situation. Same thing with Lee Harvey Oswald at the Texas Movie Theater. When they came to kill him, he just started shouting, "I'm not resisting arrest, I'm not resisting arrest," so they couldn't put a bullet into him. That's why they had to have Jack Ruby cowboy him a couple of days later.
Just to get back onto a different subject, the one you dealt with before, this torture thing with the CIA and what have you. I mean, this has been going on since Vietnam. It's not a
even before that. But it's time for the American people to confront the true nature of the government in Washington, D.C., which uses torture, lies about nuclear weapons to justify war. You know, we got to stop wagging that flag in front of our eyes and letting it be a blindfold. We have to look at what this government truly, truly is.
Well, this torture has been going on for so long. Tens of thousands of agents and military have been involved in it, not just a few. We're not talking about a small number of people persuaded to torture innocents to get false information, which we know happens because people will say anything to stop the pain.
Yeah, and even if it's not true, which certainly happen in a lot of cases. But you're absolutely right. This is not a small group of rogue agents or something. It is systemic, and it goes all the way to the top of the U.S. government. And in this case, with regard to what happened at Abu Ghraib, that falls squarely on George W. Bush.
Absolutely. And, I mean, it's still going on with these black sites. I mean, the one in Diego Garcia, which finally came to light because of MH370 and all the discussion of what happened to that flight. So, you know, this is just barbaric. Well,
the interesting thing about this story, this confirms what I was saying before. Waterboarding was not the worst that was being done to these people. Far worse things were being done to them. And the government hoped they could keep it from the American people. They can't. The American people need to face up to what this government really is. Stop singing the anthem and the songs and waving the banners and stuff like idiots. It's time to confront what this government has become, what they're doing to the world in our name, with our money, with our children's lives.
I don't blame just the American government. The British government did the same. I mean, that young man, Hamad, released from Gitmo, he was given $5 million to keep quiet, but he didn't. And he showed the scars on an important piece of his body, which was perpetrated by the use of box cutters on his very delicate.
Yes, as Jeremy Clarkson would say, his man sausage, gentleman's sausage.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Claire's laughing in the other room. Anyway, John, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got another caller waiting on the line when we get back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And for some reason, Fox News is doing this big rah-rah about America's accomplishments in space. And they do have a hook because today is the anniversary of Ed White's Gemini 4 spacewalk, where he became the first American to go EVA, although not the first human. That went to, I think it was Leonov. But they're going on about, Skylab and Apollo 11 and how great we were. And I'm kind of wondering why they're pushing this at a time when most Americans are now aware we've lost our space capability. We can't even get our own astronauts up to the space station. We don't have the space shuttle anymore. We're in kind of this lull. President Obama is the first president since Eisenhower to preside over a country without a national space effort. I do know the U.S. government has issued tenders for American companies to start building rocket engines so they can stop having to buy them from those evil Russians. All right, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls real quick here. Al in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, how are you, Mike?
I'm fine.
Earlier you were talking about, the death penalty. Up in Canada, they don't have the death penalty.
Good for Canada.
And, pardon me?
Good for Canada.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to sentence someone to death, that would mean that you have absolutely no feelings, no regard, no respect for what life really is.
Well, I understand.
Are you a psychopath?
No, I understand the theory behind the death penalty, to scare people away from doing bad things, like executing foreign spies. The problem is how it's handled in this country, with the very long period of time between the commission of the crime and the final death sentence. We've had a lot of people in death row just die of natural causes. It's lost its deterrent. And for people to know they live in a just country, punishment has to be seen to be applied to the guilty and only to the guilty. And my biggest beef with the death penalty, I mean, if the system were absolutely perfect, I would say, yeah, there are cases where maybe it's justified. Okay? But with the current system, making mistakes where innocent people are being convicted and executed at a time when the police are going out and beating the crap out of law-abiding American citizens and taking their wealth just because. The system is completely broken, and I can't support the death penalty under these circumstances.
You're absolutely right. The system is completely broken.
Yeah. Okay?
And so you have to ask yourself, why? Why is this like this? Obviously, there's people that really don't care.
Yeah, and they're the people who are unfortunately drawn to positions of power and authority, sociopathic personnel.
They're psychopaths. They are psychopaths. They don't care for anyone but themselves. I mean, how can anyone justify another killing for a killing? That's like biblical stuff. And you know what? What year is this? This is 2015.
Yeah.
This is nuts.
Well, again, to play devil's advocate here, if you're dealing with somebody who was just born with a lot of bad wiring and there's no way to rehabilitate them, but again, until the system is perfect and doesn't make mistakes, it's an academic discussion. Listen, Al, I'm running a little short on time. The phone lines are loaded up. We're going to switch over here to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to say that Canada doesn't have a death penalty, but I'm sure that eventually they'll institute it for criticizing Israel or questioning the Holocaust or something. But,
could very well be, yeah. Could very well be.
Hey, I used to be stationed at Fort Benning for quite a while. Down there, they used to have the School of the Americas.
Yes.
And I remember seeing a class personally, where they had those old hand-powered generator. They had a little generator. You turn with your hands, and it powered up the radios or a telephone.
Yeah.
And they would get somebody on there and teach people how to use that, on people's testicles or what have you.
I've seen that stuff here. They tape those wires to all kinds of places just to get a reaction, and but that's what the School of the Americas does. It is a school for dictators run by the U.S. government to train their U.S. foreign puppet rulers. And that's exactly what they teach down there, how to just torture and kill anybody who stands up and says, look, I don't want to live under U.S. puppet rule.
And Michael, even back as far as probably before, but the Spanish-American War, they used a form of waterboarding even then.
Well, waterboarding goes back even to Roman times. I mean, the Inquisition used it on a lot of people, including my ancestors, and it's a very old form of torture. I mean, there's very little new about any of this except the use of electricity and drugs and so forth. These are very barbaric methods coming right out of the Dark Ages that our government is using to coerce confessions from people for political purposes. So they can say, we got this guy to confess that they're planning on attacking us. We have to attack their country first. We know what the purpose of this is. Every intelligence agent that I have ever talked to says torture never produces actionable, accurate intelligence. Torture exists to get politically expedient confessions. That's what it's for.
That's right. And to intimidate a prisoner population as well.
Yeah, well, it's intended to intimidate the entire population, even if you're not in prison. They got Uncle What's-This and tore his fingernails out. We better not say anything bad about our occupiers.
Yeah, and when you couple that with, I don't know, maybe it's you who talk about how they tortured all those people prior to the invasion of Iraq to try to get them to confess to something we knew already wasn't around.
Yep.
It's really almost unbelievable. But
I imagine Dick Cheney and George Bush were getting the videotapes of the torture sessions and watching them late at night, going, yeah. Okay. All right, listen, Peter, I'm going to let you go here. We're running out of time for the show. We're going to shut down the phone lines for right now. Before we hit the commercial break, I love this story. So much. It's basically coming out of PatriotRising.com. Apparently, school district administrators in Denver decided to respond to all the complaints about the Michelle Obama lunches by volunteering to eat one themselves. And they got served a cold chicken patty on a rock-hard burned bun, frozen strawberries, and a very hard pear. And now the school administrators in Denver are saying, maybe there really is something to all these horrible, horrible complaints. All righty, getting before the commercial break here. Gosh darn, that human-caused global warming. Boston has its coldest days to start June in recorded history. They've had the coldest high temperatures ever, starting off June. May was one of the coldest, wettest on records. Portland sets record for coldest high temperature. I love this little story that came out of 538.com where this writer's just out there saying there's still a record number of winter jackets on the streets of the Northeast. And, of course, we're hearing from down under in Australia, they're setting cold temperature records as they go into another very harsh winter. And still the carbon Nazis are out there saying global warming, you will believe global warming. You just hallucinated all that snow and ice and everything because you were on cheap drugs and cheap beer and everything. It's really warm. It's roasting. When we come back, the latest planned attack on those of us who refuse to believe as we are told to believe. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about human-caused global warming. It is a political agenda. It is not science. All of the dire warnings and prognostications that the carbon Nazis were screaming at us back to 1990 did not come true. We still have snow and ice every winter. We've had very hard record-setting winters. Greenland still has all of its ice. The polar bears are doing very well, thank you very much. And we keep finding instances where all these various scientists and agencies, including NASA and NOAA, are caught faking the data. Al Gore insisted the Arctic would be completely ice-free by last summer. Didn't happen. The Arctic ice caps, both polar ice caps, have just as much, if not more ice than they did back in 1979. But we live under a government that will never admit they were wrong or change course. And there's a lot of carbon tax money riding on perpetuating this hoax of human-caused global warming, plus the Agenda 21 out of the UN, where we're all supposed to let the United Nations decide what our quality of life is going to be, regardless of our own personal attitudes and how hard we work. Live in a shed, burn cow flaps for cooking your meal, and whatever else is left of your wealth, turn over to the money junkies, because they deserve it. You must make do so that they can have more. That's the way the invisible playmate in the sky wants it to be. So we have Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democratic senator from Rhode Island, writing in the Washington Post, suggesting that the RICO laws should be used to prosecute anybody who refuses to believe that human activity is destroying planet Earth. Now, originally, the RICO laws, which stands for Racketeer, Influence, Corruption, or I forget what the O's for. Okay, was supposed to be a tool to use against organized crime, but unfortunately courts have been redefining RICO down for some time. In 1994, the Supreme Court ruled RICO statutes could be applied to pro-life activists on the grounds that their activity interfered with interstate commerce, even though the organization itself didn't have economic motives. They weren't doing it to make money. They were working from honest motives here. Okay, the O is in organization. Racketeer, Influence, Corrupt Organization laws. So now RICO has been defined where if what you're doing is a threat to commerce, if it's a threat to the money, they can hit you with the RICO laws. And obviously those of us who are refusing to believe that human activity is warming the world because of all the snow and ice we're dealing with, can be hit with the RICO laws because we're a threat to the carbon tax. We're a threat to all those green companies that got huge tax subsidies to set up solar plants and windmills and things that actually didn't work out very well. There's big bucks in the global warming movement. The global warming movement likes to say, oh, well, the opposition's all funded by the oil companies. Well, look at how much money is being handed out to those who will support global warming. Millions in research funding, tax subsidies for windmills that catch on fire and kill birds. Remember Solyndra? Huge federal guarantees on a company that just went bust. There's big bucks in global warming. Carbon trading. Huge moneymaker. You know who set up carbon trading with Al Gore? Ken Lay from Enron. The plan was to do to planet Earth with carbon dioxide what Enron did to California with electricity. And they're all sitting around with their hands rubbed together waiting for the loot to come on in from human-caused global warming. Only Mother Nature went the other way. So their solution is go on out and just terrorize people with threats of RICO prosecution, so they'll nod their head and say, oh yes, I believe the world is getting warmer. Oh yes, I believe it's all the fault of humans. Oh yes, sir, I will give you my carbon tax money and buy your carbon credits like an obedient little slave should. Does this sound like a free nation to you when you have a senator threatening to charge you with organized crime laws because you looked at the snow and ice last winter and said, this is not making sense? This is a very dangerous government we're dealing with that will not admit when they're wrong, will not change course, will not admit error, will use the force of the courts, if not outright torture and assassination, to silence anybody who doesn't go along with this incredible fairy tale they've spun of human-caused global warming, a recovering economy, safe GMOs and vaccines, and evil Muslims. Now, every once in a while, I'll go over to cracked.com. It's a humor and satire magazine, and I didn't used to pay a lot of attention to them. But they have evolved a social conscience. And every once in a while, they'll have an article that is worth sharing. And the one I linked to today is 6 insane news stories about terrorism that were total BS. And we all remember these. We saw them in the corporate media. ISIS orders genital mutilations for 4 million Iraqi women. Complete fiction. Didn't happen. Completely made up. So you say, oh, we've got to hate ISIS. They mutilate women. They behead people. They torture little puppy dogs. The claim that ISIS is in America, no basis in fact whatsoever. Same thing with the claim that ISIS is just across the border in Mexico. Absolutely no support for it. They even tried to get the science fiction people in there. Remember when the report was out that Star Wars set, the Tatooine Star Wars set, had been overrun, was being used by a base for ISIS terrorists. Also not true. And it goes on and on from that. Yes, government lies to you all the time about everything. And I posted a flashback to a story I wrote a while ago. Of the liars, by the liars, and for the liars. And you need to read it. It is a history of the giant lies that have reshaped the course of history. And you need to understand, you live in an age of lies. You are saturated with lies. Lies from the corporate media, lies by advertisers, lies by corporations. Truth has become such a valuable commodity, the government is economizing it. And when you read through this article, and you should, you will come to understand governments always lie to their people about everything. I think they're afraid to tell the truth even once out of fear we might learn how to tell the difference. And you need to get away from this idea that it's only an occasional lie, or an occasional deception, or an occasional fraud. From Washington, D.C., from Wall Street, from Big Pharma, from the GMO companies. No. It's not occasion. It's constant, ongoing policy. They lie about everything. It's not a joke. I think the reason the Matrix movie franchise took off is that people understood to some level that it really was a metaphor for our current life. We look at these TV screens and we think we're seeing the real world through them, and we're not. We're seeing an artificial construct, a matrix, that controls how we think, how we feel, who we like, who we hate. And it's time to take the red pill and break free from that. Another little interesting story from Natural Society, continuing the trend of government abandoning even the pretext of wanting to care for us. Senate Bill 697 is going to transfer to the chemical industry itself the authority to write chemical safety standards. There won't be any government or civilian oversight. If Dow Chemical says this is safe, yep, it's safe, we will just believe that. And after looking at how Monsanto assured us all that glyphosate was safe, and now even the World Health Organization is saying, yeah, cancer causer. Corporations are always going to lie about their products to get you to buy their products. That's why you need independent review and oversight, which is supposed to be the job of the federal government. They can't be bothered. They're too busy out there on the campaign trail getting those big fat checks from companies like Dow Chemical. Anyway, there's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical. Go ahead and get angry. Share what you know with who you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.